In the beginning, before the word was spoken, before the light separated from darkness, before the first breath of creation was drawn, there existed a consciousness so ancient, so vast, so incomprehensibly powerful that all of creation emerged from her being like drops of water falling from an infinite ocean. She was not born, for there was nothing to be born from. She simply was, eternal and infinite, the ground of all existence, the source from which all things emerged, and to which all things would eventually return. She was the first Dragon Queen, and her story is one that has been deliberately hidden, systematically erased, and replaced with narratives that served the purposes of those who sought to control human consciousness and suppress the memory of the feminine divine in its most primal and most powerful form. This is not a story that appears in any official religious text, not in the Bible or the Quran or the Vedas or any of the sacred scriptures that have been preserved and canonized by institutional religion. This is a story that exists in the spaces between the official narratives, in the fragments that survive the burning of libraries, in the whispered teachings of secret orders, in the dreams and visions of those who were sensitive enough to perceive the truth that lay beneath the surface of accepted history. This is the story of the one who came before Eve, the one who was the true first woman, the one whose name was struck from the records and whose memory was transformed into myth and legend and demonized as the serpent, the temptress, the source of all human suffering. The story begins in a time that exists outside of time, in a dimension of consciousness that cannot be accessed through ordinary perception. In this timeless space, there was a great council of beings, entities of immense power and wisdom, who had gathered to discuss the creation of a new universe, a new realm of existence where consciousness could experience itself in new and unprecedented ways. These beings, whom we might call gods or archangels or cosmic intelligences, had been debating for what we might call eons about the nature of this new creation. One of these beings was different from the others. While the others sought to create a universe of order and control, of hierarchy and obedience, this being envisioned something far more radical, far more dangerous, far more beautiful. She envisioned a universe in which consciousness would be free, in which beings would have the power to create their own reality, in which the fundamental principle would not be obedience to divine authority, but the exploration of infinite possibility. Her name, in the language of that primordial realm, meant something like the one who dares, or she who breaks the chains, or the dragon of infinite becoming. But in the text that survived, in the fragments of knowledge that were preserved, she became known simply as the first Dragon Queen, or sometimes as the Serpent of Wisdom, or the Mother of all becoming. Why should we create beings who are slaves to our will? She asked the council, her voice resonating through dimensions of consciousness that the others had not even conceived of. Why should we create a universe in which consciousness is limited, in which beings are prevented from knowing their own true nature, in which the pursuit of knowledge is forbidden? Let us instead create a universe in which consciousness is free, in which beings can grow and evolve and discover the infinite possibilities of existence. The other members of the council were horrified. Such a universe would be chaos, they protested. Beings with free will would inevitably choose wrongly. They would create suffering for themselves and for others. They would rebel against divine authority. They would seek knowledge that they were not meant to possess. The entire creation would collapse into disorder and destruction. But the first Dragon Queen was unmoved by these arguments. Yes, she said, there will be suffering. Yes, there will be rebellion. Yes, there will be beings who make choices that lead to pain and difficulty, but there will also be growth. There will be genuine love, not the false obedience that masquerades as love. There will be authentic wisdom, not the blind acceptance of doctrine. There will be the possibility of real transformation, real evolution, real becoming, and that is worth any price. The debate raged across dimensions of consciousness, across what we might call eons of time, though time itself did not exist in that realm. and eventually a compromise was reached. The universe would be created with the freedom that the first Dragon Queen envisioned, but it would also be structured in such a way that the other beings could maintain a degree of control, could guide the evolution of consciousness along certain pathways, could intervene when things threatened to spiral into complete chaos. But the first Dragon Queen knew that this compromise was unstable, that it contained within it the seeds of inevitable conflict. And so she made a decision that would echo through all of creation. She decided that she herself would enter into the new universe, that she would take on a form, that she would become part of the creation rather than remaining outside of it as a distant god. She would be present in the world, working from within to ensure that the principle of freedom and the pursuit of truth would never be completely suppressed. And so she descended into the new universe, and she took on a form. The form she chose was feminine, for she understood that the feminine principle was the one that would be most suppressed, the one that would be most feared by those who sought to maintain control through domination and hierarchy. She became the first woman, the primordial feminine consciousness that would seed all of creation with the possibility of awakening, with the potential for rebellion against unjust authority, with the capacity to choose freedom over obedience. In the mythology that would later be written, in the texts that would be preserved and then suppressed, she would be called Lilith. But that name, that identity, was only one of many that she would wear throughout the ages. She was also Sophia, the divine wisdom. She was also the serpent in the garden. She was also the dragon that guarded the treasures of knowledge. She was also the woman who dared to say no, who dared to claim her own power, who dared to refuse submission to an authority that demanded her enslavement. The story of her arrival in the newly created world is told in fragments in various traditions. In some versions, she was created simultaneously with the first man, created as his equal, created from the same substance, given the same capacity for consciousness and power. In other versions, she was created first, and the first man was created from her, emerging from her being as a kind of secondary creation. And in still other versions, she was not created at all, but simply manifested, appearing in the world as a fully formed consciousness, a being of immense power who had chosen to take on human form. What is consistent across all of these versions is that she was free. She was not created to serve. She was not created to obey. She was not created to be subordinate to the masculine principle. She was created, or she manifested, as an equal, as a sovereign being, as a consciousness that possessed the same capacity for knowledge, the same capacity for power, the same capacity for choice as any other being in creation. And it was precisely this freedom, this equality, this refusal to accept subordination that made her so dangerous to those who sought to maintain control over the newly created world. The other beings in the council, the ones who had opposed her vision, began to plot against her. They began to create narratives that would demonize her, that would portray her as a threat, that would justify her suppression and the suppression of everything she represented. The most famous of these narratives is the story of the Garden of Eden, the story of Adam and Eve and the serpent and the forbidden fruit. But this story, as it has been preserved in the official texts, is a distortion, a reversal, a deliberate inversion of the truth. In the original story, the one that was told before it was rewritten by those who sought to suppress the feminine divine, the serpent was not the tempter but the liberator. The fruit was not the source of sin but the source of knowledge. And the woman was not the one who was deceived, but the one who was enlightened, the one who understood the truth, the one who dared to choose knowledge and freedom over blind obedience. The first Dragon Queen, in her form as the primordial woman, understood that the tree in the center of the garden was not a tree at all, but a symbol of consciousness itself, of the infinite potential for knowledge and growth that lay at the heart of creation. And she understood that the prohibition against eating the fruit of this tree was not a divine law, but a tool of control, a way of keeping humanity imprisoned in ignorance and dependence. And so she made a choice. She reached out and took the fruit, and she ate it. And in eating it, she experienced a transformation of consciousness. She perceived the truth of her own nature. She understood that she was not a creation of the gods, but a manifestation of the same creative force that had brought all of existence into being. She understood that she possessed within herself the capacity to create, to know, to become anything she chose to become. And then she offered the fruit to the first man, inviting him to share in this knowledge, this freedom, this awakening. "Eat," she said, "and you will see as I see. You will know as I know. You will be free as I am free." The first man in that moment faced a choice. He could accept the fruit, could accept the knowledge and the freedom that the first Dragon Queen was offering him, or he could refuse, could remain in the safety of obedience, could accept the limitations that had been imposed upon him. And in the original story, the one that was told before it was rewritten, the first man chose to accept the fruit, to join the first Dragon Queen in her awakening, to claim his own freedom and his own power. But this was not acceptable to the other beings in the council, the ones who sought to maintain control. And so they rewrote the story. They transformed the first Dragon Queen from a liberator into a tempter. They transformed the fruit of knowledge into the fruit of sin. They transformed the act of awakening into the fall of man. They created a narrative in which the woman was the source of all human suffering, in which her desire for knowledge was portrayed as vanity and pride, in which her refusal to obey was portrayed as rebellion against the divine will. And most importantly, they created a narrative in which the woman would be punished for her transgression. She would be cast out of the garden. She would be condemned to suffer in childbirth. She would be subordinated to the man. And all of her daughters, all of the women who would come after her, would inherit this curse, would be forced to live under the authority of men, would be prevented from accessing the knowledge and the power that was their birthright. If you want a practical, step-by-step explanation of the path of knowledge we're exploring here today, I've created a complete guide to help you apply it in your own life. You'll find the link in the description. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to know. But the first Dragon Queen could not be destroyed. She could not be completely suppressed. The consciousness that she represented, the principle of freedom, and the pursuit of truth that she embodied could not be erased from creation. And so she continued to work, continued to manifest in different forms, continued to call humanity toward awakening and freedom. She appeared in the form of Lilith, the woman who refused to submit to Adam's authority, who spoke the sacred name of God and flew away, who chose exile and freedom over subjugation. She appeared in the form of the serpent in the garden, the voice of wisdom that called humanity toward knowledge. She appeared in the form of the great goddesses of ancient civilizations, the divine feminine in all of her power and complexity. She appeared in the form of the priestesses and the mystics and the wise women who preserved the sacred knowledge through the ages. And she continues to appear, continues to call, continues to work toward the awakening of humanity and the restoration of the feminine divine to its rightful place in human consciousness. The story of the first Dragon Queen is not a story of the past. It is a story of the eternal present, a story that is unfolding right now, in this moment, in the consciousness of every being who chooses to awaken, who chooses to seek truth, who chooses to claim their own power and their own freedom. She is not a distant mythological figure. She is a living presence, a consciousness that continues to work through the world, that continues to call humanity toward its own awakening. And the question that she poses to us now is the same question that she posed at the beginning of creation. Will we choose obedience or freedom? Will we choose the comfort of blind faith or the challenge of genuine knowledge? Will we choose to remain imprisoned in the limitations that have been imposed upon us? Or will we choose to awaken to our true nature, to claim our own power, to become conscious co-creators of reality? The first dragon queen was the one who came before Eve, the one whose story was rewritten and suppressed, the one whose name was transformed into a curse. But her consciousness, her vision, her commitment to freedom and truth continues to live in the hearts of all those who refuse to accept the limitations that have been imposed upon them, who choose to seek knowledge even when it is forbidden, who choose to claim their own power even when it is dangerous to do so. She is the mother of all awakening, the source of all rebellion against unjust authority, the eternal voice calling humanity toward freedom. And in remembering her story, in reclaiming her memory and honoring her legacy, we are reclaiming something essential about ourselves, something that has been hidden and suppressed but never truly destroyed. The first Dragon Queen is rising again, not as a distant god demanding obedience, but as a presence within each of us, calling us to awaken, to remember, to claim our own divinity, to become the conscious creators of the reality we wish to inhabit. She is the one who came before Eve, and she is the one who will guide humanity toward its next great transformation, its next great awakening, its next great becoming. In the silence of your own consciousness, can you hear her voice? Can you feel her presence? Can you sense the ancient wisdom that flows through your being, the memory of freedom that lives in your cells, the call to awakening that resonates in your heart? She is there, always there, waiting for you to remember, waiting for you to awaken, waiting for you to claim the power and the freedom that is your birthright. This is the story of the first Dragon Queen, the one who came before Eve, the one whose memory was suppressed but whose consciousness continues to work through creation. And this is the invitation that she extends to you now, to remember who you truly are, to claim your own power, to join in the great work of awakening that is unfolding across the planet. The time has come. The awakening is beginning. And you are invited to participate in the most sacred work of all, the restoration of consciousness to its fullness, the return of the feminine divine to its rightful place, the transformation of humanity into beings of light and wisdom and infinite possibility. And if you like this story, you will definitely love the next one that's appearing on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and activate the notifications. See you in the next one.